When something goes wrong for this type of person, something that would send most people straight to their phone, instead their first move is to open a new browser tab, not to call anyone or text someone who's been through it before, just to quietly start figuring it out. And then they do. They always do. Which looks like a superpower from the outside until you spend enough time around them to realize what it actually is. Most content about self-reliant people frames it as a trait, their personality. What that framing misses is that this got built in response to something real, usually early, that left a mark before the person had the language to describe it yet. John Bowlby, the psychologist who built the foundation of attachment theory, identified a response pattern he called compulsive self-reliance. It emerges when a person's early environment teaches them, repeatedly, that reaching outward for support doesn't reliably produce it. Maybe the adults in their life were inconsistent, warm sometimes, emotionally unreachable other times, no discernible pattern to their actions. Perhaps need was met with frustration or silence, or just an absence where something was supposed to be. The child's brain does what it's always done, adapts. It stops routing the distress signal outward. It learns to process internally instead. And then it just keeps doing that for the next 30, 40, 50 years. What that actually looks like in real life, because abstract psychology doesn't hold much weight until you can see it. It's the person who spent an entire weekend teaching themselves to do something a professional could have resolved in an afternoon, because picking up the phone felt harder than acquiring the skill from scratch. It's the person who processes a devastating breakup almost entirely alone, shows up to brunch 2 weeks later seeming genuinely okay, and kind of is okay, which confuses everyone, including them. It's the person who typed the text that starts with, "Hey, can I ask you something?" and deleted it before sending. Not once or twice, regularly, and for years. These aren't personality quirks. They're habits repeated so many times they now run automatically, below the level of conscious choice, below the level of anything they think to question. There's also something happening cognitively in these people that hardly gets discussed, and I think it accounts for more than most people realize. They tend to have extremely high metacognitive activity, meaning they think about their own thinking, almost compulsively. They catch themselves mid-reaction and step outside of it to examine what's happening, or run quiet post-mortems on decisions made weeks ago. The internal conversation is fast, layered, and often more detailed than anything they'll ever say out loud. Which sounds useful. It is useful. But it creates a strange problem. By the time something has been processed enough to share, it's already been through so many internal revisions that translating it into words for another person feels almost reductive, like trying to describe a piece of music by reading out the sheet notes. Something essential doesn't survive the format change. So they don't try, or they do and feel immediately like they've given someone a pale version of the real thing, which is almost worse than saying nothing. And people on the outside read that as being closed off or cold or just very private, when what's actually happening is that the person is standing at a wide gap with no obvious first step across it. Okay, where it gets rather dangerous. At some point, gradually, with no single moment you could point to, figuring things out alone stops being a behavior and starts being an identity. It stops being something they do and becomes something they fundamentally are. I handle my own stuff. I don't need much from people. And once those beliefs calcify, accepting help stops feeling optional and starts feeling like a contradiction of the self, like agreeing to something that clashes with how they've learned to see themselves. The person who would never ask for directions and the person who can't ask for what they need emotionally. Same room, same locked door, same key they're not sure they still have. What this produces in relationships is a gap that's painful to live inside, on both sides. These people care deeply, often far more than the people around them comprehend. But the move from caring to actually letting someone in is a step that doesn't come naturally anymore. It has to be made deliberately, against the current of everything their nervous system has spent years automating. And the people who love them often feel this without being able to name it. There's real warmth there, but also this persistent sense that the last 10% is always just slightly out of reach, that they're being offered closeness up to a certain point, and then something invisible closes. And what makes that especially complicated, the person on the inside feels that gap too. They're not unaware of it. They can see it as clearly as anyone. But to them, it's not obvious how to close that gap from their side. I want to be careful not to frame all of this as damage that needs immediate fixing, because that misses something very true. The person who learned to figure things out alone built something valuable. They have a tolerance for sitting with difficulty that most people genuinely never develop. When anything in their life breaks, materially, emotionally, relationally, they don't rely on whoever's nearby to steady them. They hold themselves through it. In a life that will, at some point, hand you situations where nobody can fully help you anyway, being able to do that is remarkable. The piece worth examining is simpler than it sounds. Is the self-reliance being chosen right now by the adult who lives in that body? Or is it running automatically, written in a different era, protecting against things that haven't been real in years, still going because nobody told it to stop? Survival mechanisms don't come with expiration dates. They function continuously. The person who never asks for help doesn't get here by deciding people weren't worth leaning on. Instead, it's by learning, slowly, through repetition, that leaning didn't produce anything reliable. And the brain that absorbed that lesson did exactly what it was supposed to. It was trying to keep them safe in the only way it knew how. It just doesn't need to stay in that mode forever. The need for connection is still in there. It didn't go anywhere. The want for someone to just know, to not have to go back to the beginning every time, to just let someone else hold it for a few minutes without it becoming a whole thing. That want is alive. It stopped knocking on the door, but it didn't stop wanting to come in. So it's not just a personality type or simply who you are. That's a history. And the powerful thing about a history, unlike a personality, is that it's allowed to end differently than it started. Okay, something that actually ties into everything we've talked about here. If you're someone who's used to handling everything in your own head, you'll know how easy it is for things to stay there, half-processed, looping, never really landing anywhere concrete. That constant internal processing can feel productive, but it doesn't always move things forward. So I've linked something in the pinned comment that I think fits this exact pattern really well. It's a set of structured 7-day guides designed to take what's usually stuck in your head and externalize it into clear daily actions. Things like resetting your focus, getting your sleep back under control, and clearing that mental backlog that just keeps building in the background. What I like about it is that it doesn't rely on motivation or overthinking. It just gives you something small and specific to do each day, so you're not carrying everything alone in your head anymore. It's in the description and pinned comment if you want to take a look.